Welcome back for our penultimate segment of our Acts Bible study. Today we're looking at Acts chapter 27. And here are some selected verses. First, verses 20 through 26. When neither the sun nor the moon appeared for many days, and the raging storm continued to pound us, all hope of our being saved from this peril faded. For a long time no one had eaten. Paul stood up among them and said, "Men, you should have complied with my instructions not to sail from Crete. Then we would have avoided this damage and loss. Now I urge you to be encouraged. Not one of your lives will be lost, though we will lose the ship." Last night an angel from the God to whom I belong, and whom I worship, stood beside me. The angel said, "Don't be afraid, Paul. You must stand before Caesar. Indeed, God has also graciously given you everyone sailing with you. Be encouraged, men. I have faith in God that it will be exactly as he told me. However, we must run aground on some island." And then verses 39 through 44. In the morning light, they saw a bay with a sandy beach. They didn't know what land it was, but they thought they might possibly be able to run the ship aground. They cut the anchors loose and left them in the sea. At the same time, they untied the ropes that ran back to the rudders. They raised the foresail to catch the wind and made for the beach. But they struck a sandbar and the ship ran aground. The bow was stuck and wouldn't move, and the stern was broken into pieces by the force of the waves. The soldiers decided to kill the prisoners to keep them from swimming to shore and escaping. However, the centurion wanted to save Paul, so he stopped them from carrying out their plan. He ordered those who could swim to jump overboard first and head for land. He ordered the rest to grab hold of planks of debris from the ship. In this way, everyone reached land safely. So we are nearing the end of Acts because we're also nearing the end of the semester. And we have just Acts 27 today and Acts 28 next week. And that concludes all of everything that happens in the book of Acts. And of course, we are with Paul headed toward Rome, where he has been told he will be able to appeal to Caesar and bring his story there. And so he's on board a ship with plenty of other sailors and some cargo, and of course the centurion who has him in custody. So the verses that you heard are kind of from the middle and end of this chapter because their ship voyage does not encounter smooth sailing, which of course nothing that Paul does encounters smooth sailing, but they are sailing at maybe not the wisest time of the year. They find themselves in the midst of some really terrible weather and in a hurricane. And so this is one of those moments where Paul just seems a little bit insufferable, right? Because he stands up in front of all of them and he's like, "Hey, you should have done what I said. I told you so." But then he's like, "But no, be encouraged because everyone's going to be saved." Which kind of makes you think in terms of like soldiers and sailors, you wonder why they didn't just throw him overboard. But they didn't. They did go through some more trials. They were low on food, but they did manage to find a safe spot where the ship actually ran aground, of course, and they're on this island, and they are all saved. Nobody dies, so Paul is correct, but probably annoyingly so, and they're going to get to Rome, but now they don't have a ship. So Paul has been told by God that he's going to make it there. We don't know how that's going to happen. That will be in our last segment next week. But this is another one of those chapters where, you know, it's pretty interesting, pretty exciting. This is a travel log. It's actually a genre of writing, right? A genre of literature, the travel log. We're hearing about not just one person's faith experience, but just in general, their life experience and their journey and they're traveling. And, it's again one of those parts of scripture that make you realize, it's not just a bunch of dry. Now, like when Paul writes letters to the early churches, sometimes that gets pretty deep and difficult to kind of get into and understand. His letter to the church in Rome is actually sometimes kind of confusing. There's a lot of debates about what parts of it mean. But here in the book of Acts, it's not meant to have necessarily that theological depth. That's not the purpose of it. The purpose of it is for us to understand what's happening in the early life of the church and to know what Paul, this apostle who went through this crazy conversion experience and suddenly went from persecuting Christians to leading them, what he went through, right? And we know if we think way back to his conversion in Acts chapter 9, God tells Ananias, who's been asked to go help Paul, God says, I'll let him know what he's going to have to suffer through to be my apostle. And clearly he suffers through a lot, right? Being almost shipwrecked, being stuck in a hurricane, traveling when the weather is bad and it's not a right time to travel. Not a lot of fun, but Paul persists and Paul is faithful and has reassurance from God that he's going to get to his destination. Now, that reassurance isn't necessarily that everything's going to be great when he gets to Rome, but he's going to get there. He's going to fulfill his purpose, and despite the hardships, he will do what he was supposed to do, what he's been sent to do. And it's almost the last week of classes. There may be a lot of hardship coming, but we also will get to the end of the semester and do what God has called us to do. We'll be empowered to continue to be faithful, whether finals turn out the way we want, classes go the way we're hoping, or something changes. If those who are graduating get the job that they want, or if they get a different job, or something else happens. Things don't always work out the way we plan and the way we want, but God was with Paul through all of these things, and God will also be with us. So take heart. I know it's a stressful time of year, but we'll make it, and God will be with us through whatever comes in the last week of class and finals week. And we will see how Paul actually makes it to Rome next week in our last segment of this Acts Bible study. So thanks for joining, and check back next week one more time, and I'll see you then. Bye.